Now, Tom, here we are in Heritage House, and of course this is the first settlement. You have all the history of Abbeyleix here, and this is the first settlement.
Yes, this is a model of the monastery, the Cistercian monastery in Abbeyleix. Established by Conor O'Moore in 1183, he gave a grant of lands to the Cistercians. They set up their monastery, and the reason we have a model, curiously, is that there's not a vestige of the monastery remaining above ground. Wow. And that's an interesting story in itself.
Yeah.
The monastery would have existed here in Abbeyleix for nearly 400 years, and towns tended to grow up in the shadow of the monasteries, because monasteries were protected, so they were safe havens. Yeah. So people would come, they would settle, they would stay. They actually became tenants of the monks, and then latterly towns began to develop. And that would be the story of Old Town in Abbeyleix, which developed sometime between 1183 until the Old Town became kind of disestablished in favour of the new town of Abbeyleix.
Okay, and what happened after this?
After the monasteries, what happened with the monasteries was really, I suppose, the big watershed for the monasteries was the suppression under Henry VIII. He was having a bit of a row with the church at the time.
Yeah.
He suppressed the monasteries, Abbeyleix included, and he took the lands unto himself, and he then granted those lands to whomsoever he wished. In the case of Abbeyleix, to a fellow called Black Tom Butler of Ormond. Bit of a scoundrel, actually, I think.
Okay.
There's another story relating to him. Kilkenny Castle would be a Butler castle. And the Butlers held sway over this area for about 100 years after that, after the suppression in the early 1500s. And that in itself colours the way things panned out for Abbeyleix in the greater scheme of things.
Okay.
After the Butlers, the lands reverted to the king. Curiously, or interestingly, the King of England, Charles II, knew exactly where Abbeyleix was. You wouldn't believe it, but
wow.
He did, because he intervened at one stage when the lands were being granted to another Butler, another Ormond. He intervened and said, no, give them to Edward Massey. So the lands, the Abbey lands in Abbeyleix were granted to Sir Edward Massey by a direct intervention of Charles II. Massey had helped Charles II regain the throne. And he actually was the landlord here for some time. He died in 1674. And then another fella enters the picture, a fella called Denny Muscamp. And Denny Muscamp was an interesting guy, amongst other things, a property speculator, always on the lookout for a property.
Okay.
And he spotted the remains of Massey's lease, and he bought it from the trustees in what might have been a shady deal.
Okay.
And this guy, Denny Muscamp, he was also working for Michael Boyle, who latterly became the Church of Ireland Archbishop of Armagh, and he married the boss's daughter. And they had a daughter, Mary. And when they were looking for a suitable husband for Mary, they picked a guy called Sir Thomas Vesey, a very nice Church of Ireland, who would latterly become a bishop.
And I believe we can see him over here. Will we go over and have a look at him?
We can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Tom, here he is in all his glory. Mr. Vesey.
Sir Thomas Vesey. Sir Thomas was the first of the de Veseys. They weren't de Vesey by this stage because they hadn't yet received a title. But he was the first. He was a reverend gentleman, and he latterly became the Bishop of Ossory. He was Denny Muscamp's son-in-law, married to his daughter Mary. And he gained the lease, the remains of Massey's lease, from his father-in-law. Not without its problems. There was a legal case about Muscamp's acquiring of Massey's lease, which went on from 1675 until 1769, finally settled in favour of the de Veseys by now. And the de Veseys are still here. Tom de Vesey is the 7th Viscount. And he descends from this man, Sir Thomas. And you can see the family name still retains after all these years.
Tom, the de Veseys encouraged commerce in the town. Tell us what we're looking at here.
This is a ledger from Morrissey's. And the Morrissey family came to the developing town of Abbeyleix in 1775. The town had been started by the first Viscount de Vesey, and people heard about this new town that was going to be developed. It's going to be a planned town, so there were going to be opportunities there. And the Morrisseys came, took a lease on a plot of land at the lower end of the town and built a one-storey building, and they opened a general store. And the Morrissey family were still trading in that establishment up to Christmas 2004. And this is one of the ledgers dating from the early 1900s.
And Tom, I can't believe the thickness of the carpets. And of course, there's pictures over here of them working in the factory.
Yeah, this is actually an extension to the factory. This was built in 1906. They were doing so well that they built this extension, and very cleverly done. When they thought about it a lot, they put in a skylight to give natural light over the drawing table.